ladies and gentlemen. This is Ayman Adnan representing the Shahid Javed Barki Institute of Public Policy, and I welcome all of you to our Policy Hub segment for February 2022. With us today, we have Mr. Peter Jacob to talk about the ideals of social justice that is going to be marked on the World Social Justice Day on February 20th. Mr. Jacob is currently directing the Lahore-based Center for Social Justice. It is a research and advocacy organization. He has also been a human rights activist for the last 2 decades, rather more so, and has a lot of experience in campaigning and advocacy. He has also worked with the National Commission for Justice and Peace, and it has been a faith-based NGO. He has worked with many prestigious organizations, some of which are Amnesty International Pakistan, Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, Democratic Commission for Human Development, Forum Asia, Asian Center for People's Progress, and Tang Wasaib organization. Along with this, he is also an author and has penned 3 books in English and Urdu. Also with that, he is a freelance journalist and has been regularly contributing in the daily newspapers. Thank you, sir, for taking your time out for us and contributing to the cause of social justice.
Thank you, Ayman, for coming, and thanks to the Shahid Javed Barki Institute. It's a pleasure to be talking about social justice for the Social Justice Day.
Sir, before we start with our couple of questions, do you have something to say regarding the idea of social justice? Any notion that you feel is very close to your heart and you would like to put it out there for the people? Very briefly, so that we can move on.
I think both the concept and practices related to social justice are historical and universal. We see a lot of manifestations in the history where law was enacted and where practices were brought forth, religious ethos were preached about social justice. So basically, I think the idea of social justice is about removing inequalities that are embedded sometimes in our structures, social systems, political systems. So it is about equalizing the opportunities and equalizing the status where it is needed to actually greater happiness of the society as well as individuals.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'd like to ask you that how do you recognize social justice as an indispensable entity for the achievement and maintenance of peace and security within the country and even outside, but with special reference to Pakistan?
Peace, as is said, is not absence of war. So it is basically sustainable development of a society, its cultural, political and social development that enables peace. That is what ensures lasting peace. That is why I think to ensure that the public policies are not elitist, are not administrative in their nature, but they are people-centric. They are need-based, they are knowledge-based, they are evidence-driven. These are the parameters that actually enables public policy and the measures taken to be able to bring about human development, the idea of holistic development. So that is what I think ultimately builds. There is a lot of material and studies that suggest that democracies tend to stay peaceful. The countries which have evolved norms around better social services and better social protections are actually peaceful societies. I mean, of all nature. I mean, it is not absence of war, as I said. It is not free of conflict though, but there are less conflict, and they tend to be non-violent conflicts.
Okay. So, sir, what I can gather from what you've said is that there's a difference between positive and negative peace, number one. Number two, you believe that the theories such as the democratic peace theory, they are valid, and places with democratic norms and cultures are more peaceful, and the public policies and the human development is more lasting and sustainable at those places, right?
Yes, very right.
So, moving on to our next question. I'd like to ask you that what are the basic rights and liberties, in your opinion, that a state and society have to guarantee to the public in order to establish social justice?
In the rights-based approach, we consider three areas to be vital. We call them core freedoms. I mean, historically, it is religious freedom, freedom of conscience, that has, provided basis of discourse as well as conflict. But then the freedom, first of all, freedom of conscience and thought and expression, freedom of association, and freedom to peaceful assembly. These are core freedoms that we consider necessary for any society to be able to enjoy social justice, to build a capacity to resolve their conflicts, basically.
Okay.
So we say normally that it is in modern day state, these are freedoms which basically guarantee the other freedoms. The rest of freedoms and rights are dependent on these core things. If people have their civil and political rights, their liberty to engage in, thoughts, processes, to evaluate, and then assembly and association. These are core freedoms we consider.
All right, sir. Sir, there's something very interesting that you just mentioned, that these freedoms are a means to, or maybe a mechanism of conflict resolution within the society, right? Could you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, basically, we have seen that societies which experience autocracy or authoritarianism, they tend to be just postponing some of the conflict resolution that needs to be done. For instance, for a long time, right to development or economic rights was considered, as important as other freedoms. I mean, freedom of expression or political rights were compromised in so many systems. But we see that, those societies, even if they achieved marvelous economic progress, people were not happy, and that made the country somewhat fragile, somewhat prone to more conflicts and fault lines.
Okay, that could easily could have been exploited by external entities.
That's right.
All right. So, in the same regard, which institutions do you think need to be galvanized and strengthened, especially in a country like Pakistan, the developing world, in order to ensure the distributive justice and inclusive growth, and prevent concentration of wealth, power, and opportunities in a few privileged sections of the society?
Well, our Constitution of 1973, in its Articles 37 and 38, speak about social justice very plainly, and international universal standards are focused. So, alleviation of poverty, raising literacy rate, raising economic opportunities, and tackling the question of discrimination, the structural, systemic discrimination. They have been all listed as objectives of our policy principles, basically. So, I mean, in that way, we are fortunate that at least we have normative resource to rely upon. Although in our policies, these are the values and principles that we ignored also. I mean, it can be observed in many projects, many plans that we made. At least 14 plans, 5-year plans that we've seen. Us failing in those objectives, those targets, and then that brings us to a question: why our policies failed and how. But at the same time, I will focus on your question about the greater happiness for the society. And I think the kind of vulnerable democracy that we've had has placed everyone in jeopardy. So not even the most powerful people in this country, the prime ministers, the presidents, people who were considered to be all powerful, have experienced threats and vulnerabilities and failures. And that is what, creates kind of insecurity for the citizens of Pakistan, be it any class, uh, that that destabilizes our whole polity, economy, relations. So that is why you see it is always an opportunity to actually focus on the basic fundamental question of rule of law, and then for everyone, basically. So nobody is safe until everyone is safe. Uh, Nobody is secure and nobody is respected, honored, if the principle of dignity of all uh, is safeguarded.
So, sir, okay, fine. One institution could be your justice system, right? Does any other institution come into your mind that you think, if placed on a pedestal, can do better?
I think we need improvement in almost all institutions. Perhaps that's why I missed your point about picking, focusing. Uh,
The low hanging fruit, is there some that kind of an institution that maybe could be dealt with first, so that there's a cyclical effect? It kind of add to the improvement of other institution. Is
there are a couple of entry points, I must say. First, I think the environment is right now in the political arena, so the parliament.
Reformation of the parliament?
Of the parliament, and that brings us to
Political
processes, and also you see a kind of sectoral reforms, and all sectors might need that. I mean, right now there is a talk about Truth and Reconciliation Commission, about accepting the mistakes, lacunas, everyone's mistakes, and then moving on to, and that's, I mean, you may call it a revolution, but still, in an evolutionary process of a country, that is going to be important. Um, Ask me, I'm right now focused on education policy reforms. So the single national curriculum, even as member of the curriculum council, which was made up of people who volunteered themselves, uh, and then as a civil society actor, as a researcher, um, I tend to observe that we are making same mistakes. It is not people centric. It is not, the process is not participatory. It is centric. I mean, we are back to, after 18th Amendment, we are back to considering that somehow a centrist policy in education would be viable and would be good. I think those failures are part and parcel of many policy making processes. Even the national security policy, the recent policy, is being critiqued on its process as well as content and the intent. And let us not forget the extent, because the operative part of the national security policy has been kept secret. It is not public yet. So, I mean, how will the implementers know? How will the people at large will be helpful in implementing that policy if the operative part is not disclosed? So I think we are lagging behind in so many things from so many aspects in policy making and social justice, if accepted. I mean, once. I mean, we haven't had enough discourse, for instance, on religious freedom. Remember the incident in Khanewal 2 days ago? It's just a repetition, and we tend to lose memory on those very sad incidents, and we haven't discussed that enough. Even at this incident, we haven't discussed how the law operates and becomes as instigator. We haven't discussed how the law implementation machinery has been so careless about it. We have lost the opportunity of judicial inquiry that was conducted 12 years ago in Gojra incident. So 6 people were lynched. High Court judge was appointed to carry out a judicial inquiry. It was carried out. It gave 10 recommendations. None of them implemented. So we need to admit as a nation, we need to admit those mistakes and failures in order to be able to move forward. So I sometimes consciously avoid critiquing one institution, one department, one ministry. It is because it is sometimes counterproductive. We need to begin from the scratch, perhaps, and in all areas of governance and policy making.
So, sir, basically, each institution that exists in Pakistan needs to introspect first. Number one. Number two, should be able to take a critique in order to better itself, right? So, sir, moving on towards some broad-based measures that we think of when we think of social justice and its implementation, its maintenance, its achievement. So, the next question is that what such kind of measures do you think must be taken in the context of adhering to the Constitution of Pakistan to foster socio-economic development that is again part of social justice?
Very right. I think the Constitution in its spirit is democratic. It is allowing a framework which has, albeit those amendments which were made during military rule in the 80s, still, and we need to get rid of some of them. We have got rid of them in 18th Amendment, but still the 8th Amendment has to be rectified to a large extent. The model that we have in that is a kind of it does mix theocracy with the democracy, but it does provide a foundational framework for building a democracy which is more inclusive and which is more forward, consultative, people-centric, forward-looking. So I think then, of course, I mean, as far as our political ideals, we can go back to Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And then, of course, introducing enough and researching and talking enough about his model of participatory democracy, because everything that he suggested in 14 points and his, various speeches, including 11th of August, 1947, he's basically giving very practical formulas for including people, including the neglected, basically, the marginalized. So we have not experimented those ideas enough. I mean, he was always talking about, empowering the federating, downtrodden, federating units, and then local governments. So, I mean, I think we can build on that. But still, you see, it would be wrong to assume that we can assign our economic order and its restructuring to consultants, to certain international institutions. I mean, they can be helpful, but the idea has to be based in Pakistan, and it has to be a social movement. It has to be a society's own. I mean, it only needs to be um, providing those links, those movements of labor, farmers, women, um, whatever, I mean, sections who have been fighting or struggling for their rights, they need to be taken on board. And some holistic approach, I mean, unfortunately, many of our political parties, they've also been very selective, and they thought that maybe patchwork, some kind of patchwork will uh, enable them. We are in a fix, yes, economy, international debt, foreign debts. They're quite disabling, I must say. But then um, we can only pick on some of the examples uh, of political, social, economic reforms, which will perhaps provide us a breathing space, and then move on to more robust economy, robust society and polity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your very comprehensive answers. And honestly, it has been the Barki Institute of Public Policy's utmost delight to interview you, to know your ideas regarding the subject. And thank you for your very fruitful sitting with us.
Thank
you
you.
very much, sir.
Thank you, Iman, for coming. And thank you for this interaction. I've learned from you.